Hey everybody, Josiah here. I've got Jeff Harris online, The Doer's Den. Just wanted to introduce you guys to a very inspirational person in my life, and I know his story is going to resonate with all of the listeners for you guys. We're really early on in the podcast, so I appreciate all of you guys listening. And I appreciate all the feedback because I'm doing a bunch of stuff wrong, and hopefully I'm doing a little bit of it right. And one thing I know for sure that I'm doing right is having Jeff Harris on as one of the early podcast hosts, because he's a pretty big deal and big person in my life. And we go back probably 2018 now, because I think we started talking in 2018. Jeff's had his own challenges in life, as we all do, but really unique story. And Jeff, I'm going to let you take it from here. I'd love to hear some early life and then going into some of your struggles starting back in 2017.
All right. Well, thank you, Josiah, for having me on your show. It's a pleasure, man. And just so everybody knows, we've been talking for, since 2018 probably, and we have yet to meet in person. And that is one of my goals this year, is to connect in person. And just a little bit of background on myself. I grew up I'm from Missouri. I live in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I've been out here for over 20 years now. I have my wife and 3 kids here. We love it. It's every day we wake up and it's like, wow, we're so blessed to live here in really a vacation destination. It's awesome. But I grew up in a small town. I actually I had a pet raccoon when I grew up, and I wore a coonskin hat to school all the way until middle school, and I actually thought I was going to grow up and be like a trapper or have my own hunting and fishing show. But there's always retirement. Maybe that's going to happen. I don't know. But I grew up. My first job was baling hay, and today I serve as a chief revenue officer for tech companies, and I'm really kind of the turnaround, scaling up guy, and I'll dive into how I got to doing that. But anyways, I have a twin brother, and growing up in Missouri, played baseball, hockey, did all the sports, and I just wanted to get out of that state, and so I went to college for a year, studying software programming, and then just signed up enlisted in the Marine Corps, and boom, I was gone. And my parents were like, "Whoa, what happened? What's going on?" And I just wanted to go see the world, and I got everything I wished for, and then some. And I only ended up spending 4 years in the Marine Corps because I wanted to go back to college and get my degree. I thought I'd go back as an officer, but I just took a different. My life had a different trajectory, different route, and ended up going back to college. Got my degrees in biomedical engineering, math, and pre-med. I thought I might go to med school. I ended up working in med device in life science research for 15 years, consulting physicians all around the world. And I started off in sales, and within a couple years I moved into product management, and then I was in sales enablement, became a chief learning officer, worked in sales operations, and I did a lot of leadership development through Franklin Covey, which I still do today. I've done it all around the world, and it's really helped me to kind of hone and craft my approach to leading teams as well, which is fantastic. Honestly, folks, if you're fortunate to facilitate a leadership training or sales training, the person that benefits the most is typically the person teaching it, quite honestly, because you have to know the content really well in order to draw it out of folks. But anyways, after I ended up working for a tech company based out of Australia, and they had an office. It was a global company that had an office here in Colorado Springs. I moved here in 2004. I ended up staying with that company for 12 years. And then I went to a med device company in Houston. Was there for 3. Then I went into consulting. I was fortunate to work with Sales Benchmark Index, SBI. They pride themselves on being the McKinsey of sales and marketing effectiveness. And I was only with them for a few months. I was actually on their podcast years prior, and that's when I was diagnosed with a rare disease called esophageal achalasia. And so esophageal achalasia essentially prevents peristalsis in your esophagus. It basically destroys the neurons and prevents you from swallowing. So it makes swallowing really hard. And for a year leading up to it, I noticed that every time I would eat, I would cough and choke and eventually regurgitate my food. And what I noticed, when you throw up as much as I did, which was pretty much every day, you start to see that your food probably didn't make it to your esophagus or make it to your stomach because it you could see it like, wow, it looks like it just chewed that up. So every time I would lay down and sleep at night, I would cough and choke until I'd get up and just like go to the bathroom and vomit. And I'd go to the doctors, and I had this recurring cough. I'd go to the doctors and nobody could figure out what it was. And the common theme that I'd hear would be like, Jeff, it sounds like you're really stressed, because I was traveling around the world. I was transforming an organization. And my wife and I were building a home. We had a lot going on. And I'm like, well, I am really stressed because I can't eat, and when I do eat, I throw it up, and I can't sleep because when I try to sleep, I just cough and choke and I aspirate. It turns out I had aspiration pneumonia, probably for the better part of that year. And it got to a point, this was 2018, and on Christmas Day 2018, I had, my kids got up, we did Christmas, and I ended up just collapsing. We had Christmas dinner the night before, Christmas Eve, we had family over, and I literally had a bite of mashed potatoes and like 2 green beans, and then little did I know that would be the last time I would actually pick up a forkful of food and chew food for an entire year. So I was admitted to the hospital on Christmas Day 2019, and I was diagnosed with esophageal achalasia and aspiration pneumonia. And so I ended up receiving Santa Claus brought me an NG tube, which is not too comfortable when you are coughing and choking already, to start draining out the fluids in my esophagus. So what happened is my esophagus had become completely compacted with food, distended 4 times its original size, and was about to burst. And fluids were draining into my lungs, and I was essentially drowning in my own nutrition, or lack thereof. And so I stayed in the hospital for almost a week, had a procedure, upper endoscopy to clear out my esophagus, and was sent home and put on a liquid diet of, here I'm actually drinking a protein shake this morning, still my go-to. I actually love it. I embrace it. But I was sent home on a liquid diet of like protein shakes and Ensure and V8s for 10 days over the holidays, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. And went back to my doctor, and I figured, wow, after 10 days, I'd go back and probably everything would be okay, and I would just go back to eating food. And she informed me that I had this disease, and in order to eat again, because not only achalasia doesn't just cause prevent peristalsis in the esophagus, it also causes the muscles in the lower esophagus to tighten up, and it caused a stricture in my lower esophagus, so it wouldn't open up, and you have a sphincter that leads down into your stomach, and the muscles were just super, super tight, so no food could get down there. It was like trying to drink or swallow something through a cocktail straw. That was like the size that I had to go through. And so she informed me that I had to have surgery, and as soon as I could have surgery was April of that year. And so I went through more tests. I went home that night. I was told that I would probably never have a steak again. I would never have like a cheeseburger or a piece of pizza, probably again in my life. And I was pretty upset. And so, but I told myself, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna cry it out tonight. I am gonna just have a little bit of poor me, a pity party, and the next morning I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna close this chapter of life, and I'm stepping forward into the unknown. I'm gonna figure this out. And so at the time, I was working as a consultant, and within about 3 weeks, I lost an enormous amount of weight. I also couldn't lay down in a bed, because if I laid down, even the liquids I drink, I couldn't drink just like a protein shake in like a normal person. I'd have to sip on it, because if I drink it too fast, I'd cough and aspirate. And if I laid down, my esophagus would never completely drain, because it was so the stricture was so intense. And so I'd have to start drinking early in the morning, and I ended up sleeping in a chair. And I slept in this chair. I'm in my home office right now, which would end up being the better part of a year. So my back went out, my hips went out. So I lost like 30 pounds. I had no strength, and literally I'm like, whoa, what is going on? And sorry, I haven't told this story in a little while, Josiah, so my mind's all over the place. But anyways, I'm home for a bit, and I called the partners in my consulting firm and said, "Hey, I need to take a sabbatical. I have this rare disease. I can't travel right now. This is my focus in my life. I got to get my health back, and it's going to take a few months." And they're fine with that. Meanwhile, a little bit of time goes by, and I get a call from a friend who is a CEO of a tech company in New Zealand, and he needed a chief revenue officer to do a transformation for his sales, marketing, and customer success teams. And I told him my situation, and he reminded me. He's like, "Jeff, honestly, dude," he's like, "your life kind of sucks right now." He's like, "But if you have a team, if you have a purpose, it'll take your mind off the fact, all the suffering you're going through, and it'll make the time go by faster till you have the surgery." He's like, "I just need you for 3 months to do a contract. You can lead this team remote, put together the right systems and processes and KPIs, put in the right media cadence, the operational rhythm and everything, and then you'll have your surgery and go back to your, doing consulting." And little did I know that I would end up becoming kind of the transformation guy, the turnaround guy who would end up smoke jumping into dozens of companies over the next many years, and doing this over and over and over again. I've had every C-level role you can possibly think of, and I'm grateful for it. And it was all because of this rare disease. And rarely do I know how I'm going to do these things. You just got to figure it out. But anyways, back to my disease thing is. Health insurance. My surgery was scheduled for April of that year. A few days prior to my actual surgery, I received a letter from my insurance denying coverage, which was really just the ultimate gut punch. Because I had been waiting. I had adapted to life living on liquids. I had figured out how to blend, lots of different nutrients, and then I have to had to make sure that everything was very viscous that I would drink. I couldn't have any lumps in it or anything like that, and so I'd have to sometimes strain, just even like athletic greens through a strainer, just so I could drink it down. And I drink it really slowly. And I figured out, adding weight gainer to my protein shakes and stuff, I was able to get to a point where my weight wouldn't go down, and I actually started to feel pretty good. It's like, if you ever been into fasting, it's like when you fast, you kill these zombie cells in your body and stuff. And I started to feel pretty awesome, except for the fact that when you don't eat food, you kind of live in what I refer to as psychological isolation, because food is a catalyst for human connection. And when you miss that, you don't get to sit down and have a meal with your family. And it was very difficult for me to do that stuff. But we'll go through some of the lessons I learned. And sorry, I'm drawing this out a little bit, but I'll try to speed it up, Josiah. But anyways, once I got that letter, my wife and I up until that point, I was just trying to battle this thing on my own. It's just like, don't tell anybody about this. It's like, this is our problem. This is my problem. I'll deal with it. Well, and this is just kind of like a small speed bump in life. And it turns out it was going to be a major mountain to climb. And so I had not asked for any help. And then once insurance pulled the plug on it, I had to embrace some vulnerability and humility, and actually come to my wife and say, "I really need your help." It's like, I really need your help with battling this health insurance claim, and she did, because I was too close to it. I mean, when you can't eat and somebody's telling you it's that well, it looks like you've adapted to life on liquids, it's like, and you're pretty hangry as it is. I've reached levels of hangry that can't even be measured, probably. You're too close to the situation. And so she did. She took the ball and she ran with it, and she battled health insurance for the big part of it that year, and got my surgery approved in November of that year, and ended up going through 3 different procedures in order to have it done, because I had lived on liquids for so long. My esophagus was just in really, really terrible shape. So I had to fast initially what was 10 days, ended up being fasting on clear liquids, water and like Pedialyte, for 40 days. In the last 7 days, I was asked to go NPO, no liquids via mouth, just to keep my esophagus completely clear. And I just volunteered to do it. It's like, I came this far. And meanwhile, my career really took off in consulting. I was introduced by the CEO of that earlier company I mentioned down in New Zealand to another tech company. Came in as a CRO, took over operations, and eventually took over as CEO. And it was quite the learning experience to turn around a struggling organization from here in my chair with a company that had offices around the globe while I'm starving to death. And so, trying to lead yourself through these times of adversity while leading a team of others was really, I mean, not only a challenge, but it was such a learning experience. And honestly, it's like taking my focus and pouring it onto the team and the company helped me to take my mind off of how, terrible my quality of life was and how hungry I was and how weak, and stuff like that. But anyways, good news. I ended up finally having a successful surgery, and I had my first bite of food on Christmas Day 2019, and so I went 365 days without ever chewing a bite of food. And the first thing I had was scrambled eggs with my family. That was our Christmas meal. Whenever you don't eat food for a year, you don't get to just go sit down and have a steak or something like that. You got to learn how to eat again. And so I had to learn how to eat. I had to learn how to chew. My jaw muscles had completely atrophied. I would chew gum a lot during my fasting, just to strengthen my jaw muscles, and you got to build back your gut biome, and that's a whole nother story I won't get into. That's a disaster, but anyways, the body's pretty resilient, and going through that, I was able to live on eggs and protein shakes, and eventually cheese, and add in things like tuna and stuff within about 3 months. And so by Easter of 2020, when COVID hit, and then you can't make this stuff up. My wife and I, we had this vision of going kind of like on a restaurant tour, and traveling and stuff, and then the whole world shuts down with COVID, and so and so my first really awesome meal was Easter dinner. It was just my wife and I, because it was COVID. We hadn't, nobody could go out or anything. And she asked me what I wanted. I was like, oh, I want crab cakes. It's been years since I've had crab cakes. And sure enough, I bite into my first crab cake, and one of my teeth falls out, and and so I had to have like emergency dental surgery. But that was another problem as well. It's I had a lot of gum issues because I grinded away my gums from the stress and sitting up. I wear a night guard, and I couldn't wear it because I would aspirate too much, and so I ended up going through a lot of dental work over the last couple of years, and still going through it just because of grinding away. I've gone through gun grafts. I crushed a lot of teeth. And yeah, there was a lot of consequences down the line of going through that. But the good thing is I'm healthy now. I had my first bite of steak last year. It took years to actually get there. It took a long time just to be able to eat chicken and things, because it's really hard for me to swallow things. There's never a day that goes by that I don't think about it. But I typically start my day with a shake around noon. It's what works for me. And having a rare disease, you walk a fine line, and so there are no cheat days when you can't eat. And it helped me to build even better habits in my life. Anyways, though, I've been going for a while, and to this day, I still serve as a consultant, kind of the turnaround transformation guru for basically whatever a company needs. I've worked in a lot of different industries, from tech, med device, insure tech, aircraft tracking, construction, you name it. It all comes down to leadership and leading teams and having a really solid business acumen. But it's always a learning experience, and I'm very grateful for it. And I wouldn't do it today if this disease hadn't grabbed hold of me and just changed the whole trajectory of my life. And I wouldn't be talking to you, man.
Yeah, never would have met. Probably never would have made it out to your house like we're going to do this year.
Exactly. We're gonna have a good time. We'll enjoy some good food, and I know that was a bit lengthy, man, but it's been a while since I told this that part of the story. It's always and I'll just be honest, as you know, because you've been through very hard things as well. Sharing that stuff is not the easiest thing, and so it's you bounce around, and I think we keep it lighthearted, but there's definitely no easy days. I mean, when you find yourself on your knees because you're so weak and you're crying because you're so damn hungry. Yeah, you don't like to think about those times too much.
Well, the good thing is you're at least on a chicken and steak sometimes now. But yeah, to your point, when you're in the midst of the struggle, you want to mentally be anywhere else. But especially like you're saying, going through in 2018, 2019, 2020, it's kind of hard to do anything else except for think about it or distract yourself with unhealthy thoughts or unhealthy things to be doing with it.
It is, and one of the things that I really tried to there's quite a few things that I really tried to enforce myself early on, and number one was don't fall into a victim mindset. It's like you got to take responsibility and don't fall victim to circumstance. At the end of the day, we have to choose to rise and be a product of our choices. And I always see like a victim kind of sees like failure or adversity as a sign to stop. And I like to turn that around and say, no, I look at this is an opportunity to learn and grow. I'm going to embrace this for everything it has to teach, no matter how hard it is. And there was a huge part of this battle that was this journey that was really helped to strengthen my faith, because at the end of the day, I remember once, I think it was really when I was a young child. I think my dad and I were talking about religion and faith, and he had said, faith is a faith until it's all you have left to hold on to. And as you know, when you're going through these times, that's really the last thing you have to hold on to. I mean, especially when you're fasting for 40 days on top of a liquid fast for an entire year, it's like, what else can you take away from me, at this point? And so I found I really grew in my my faith and my relationship with God, and to this day, it's I look at that experience as a necessity for my life to wake me up from the direction I was going and lead me to a new path. But going back to the whole victim thing, it's like, as a victim too, victims pander to victims, and so we're looking for somebody else to kind of like validate our limitations. And so to me, though, I'm like, you have to rise above that, and you have to focus on what you can control, and ignore the things that you can't, and just embrace a growth mindset. And I think that's one of the crucial things, And I always would say to myself and say to other people, and I probably said this to you before too, is own your struggle. It's like you're given this challenge, as an opportunity to grow. And if you see it as that, it doesn't make it, a whole lot easier, but it does change your mindset so that you take action versus sitting back and suffering on, all the things that you can't do. And it's not going to get you anywhere. So I think playing victim is like playing your get out of responsibility free card, and it's not going to get you through that. It's like, if you have this perpetual victim mindset, you often tend to create situations in which you suffer, and you don't need to. And I always came back to this quote by Carl Jung, who said, "I'm not what happened to me. I am who I choose to become." And I think that's really resonated with me. And some of the things I found strength in that year was poetry, scripture, and just quotes. I called it feeding the good wolf because I couldn't feed. And so I'm like, what can I do? What podcasts, what books, what can I take in? What videos can I watch to just like feed myself with super positivity and really with a growth mindset into learning and growing to tackle this obstacle.
Feed the good wolf. I remember us talking about that a lot. Reading the same book around the same time. You had mailed me one, which was so sweet of you. And I remember the content that you started putting out. I know part of it was self-help because it helped you to be doing something else and to be meditating on those thoughts from strong people. And it also, it turns you into a bit of the mountain too instead of a bit of the island. I feel like so many people, when they're going through something hard or they're in a struggle, maybe not even something as dramatic as what you've gone through, but a car accident or something like that takes them on emotion for a while. Like you said, it's really easy to play the sympathy game, which brings the waves towards you. You know, you're an island and you want the comfort and you want the understanding, and you kind of build that and you wind up communicating with people in a support system that kind of make you the focus. And on the other side of things, if you just try and build on that and acknowledge the fact that life does suck at times, and this is your mission or your journey that God's putting you on, it kind of makes you the mountain, which makes you stand out to people more, instead of feeling like all the focus is coming towards you and that's okay, and that's the way it's always going to be now.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true, you know, and I think one of the key things, and we've talked about this, is accepting reality, you know, and in these situations, you can waste a lot of time with asking yourself why this is happening to me, and why doesn't get you anywhere. Here's what why does. It traps you in the past, and you can't change that. You got to focus on just stepping forward as much as you can, you know. And I look at the word decision, and the root word is cis, means to cut away. And I use this analogy a lot in organizations because my job is to serve companies as like an agent of change. And it was Socrates who once said, the secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And the same concept applies when we're going through these things. You have to accept that yesterday is gone. And I always say, you know, welcome today as a platform of heroic possibilities, and live it as if it was your last. You know, and what's the one thing I like to say all the time is squeeze the marrow out of life. And literally, you know, it's like every day is not everybody is fortunate to get this wake up call, and that's another, you know, key thing that I really grasped during this was embracing an attitude of gratitude. I had always had I'm like a creature of habit. I've woke up and done like a gratitude journal for probably decades now, and I write down just at least 3 things that I'm grateful for. I write down a complete sentence, you know, try to be as descriptive as possible and do something different every day. Well, that year I needed something else because I'd wake up, my wife would be cooking bacon and eggs, and I would dream about eating when I did sleep, and then you start smelling like bacon and stuff, and it enters into your dream, and you're like, oh my gosh, and you wake up, and all of a sudden, instead of waking up to like, you know, a reality that should be wonderful, you wake up, and it's kind of like waking up to a nightmare, like, oh my God, that smells so good, and then all of a sudden it hits you, it's like, oh wait, I'm starving, I can't eat. And so the smell of food can be an intoxicating combination of hope and hell. But you have to use that as a fuel. And so I would go on gratitude walks. I would just be like, all right, I got to activate. I'd get up, go outside, and where we live here in Colorado is pretty amazing. And I would just go out and walk, and I would do my walk as like a gratitude walk. I would start with myself as like, okay, what are all the things that I can be grateful for? I can see, I can walk, I can, you know, all these things. And then I start spiraling outward towards my family, and then my career, and where I lived, and that stuff. And I would try to say things out loud daily. And by the time I would get done my walk, I'd come home, and I just feel like this immense energy and power that, you know, it's like, wow, because if you change your attitude, you can really change your life. And, you know, attitude is one of the most important decisions you have to make every single day. It's completely up to you. And that's one of the things that really helped me through that year was, number one, accepting reality as in, okay, here's the cards I've been dealt. What I'm going to do to try to play this hand today, and then just being grateful that I got the wake up call and I could be in the fight. And I would remind myself daily, you know, it's like, what if, you know, and I've seen this quote in other places, and I said it to myself all the time. It's like, what if the life you're living now and the choices you're making is meant to serve as somebody else's survival guide? And so my goal, you know, since then and during that time was always to try to reach out and give back to others. You know, I see somebody struggling. I've been fortunate to, you know, share my story in a lot of podcasts and do motivational talks and stuff. And there's always somebody that it registers with who's going through an extremely hard time. And my goal is just to connect with them and try to be, you know, really the chief encouragement officer. Everybody needs support. You know, it's like, what's the saying? How do you know somebody needs encouragement? If they're breathing. And we're all breathing. It's like we all do. It really is. But yeah, I think, you know, it's some of that too came down to, I reread a lot of books that I had read earlier in my life. I'm a big bookworm. And Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, was huge, and I had to reread that, because he had once said, everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's own attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And so my goal every day was to choose a good attitude and choose a way to just, embrace the suck, if you will, and methodically get through this process. And that was the big thing too, was when you're going through these hard times, as you know, you got to let go of the end game. And you got to just focus on the process. You really have to fall in love with the methodically boring. And here's what I learned. If you do what's necessary long enough, the impossible, it's going to relinquish its throne. It's kind of like, I like to run, and I've ran some ultra marathons. I ran an ultra marathon on my treadmill in 2020. Not the most fun thing, but hey, you know what I told myself? Run the mile you're in. Just run the mile you're in, and you get to the next mile, and it's like, all right, just focus on that mile. And it comes back to the Stockdale paradox. When Stockdale was he was a pilot shot down. He was a prisoner of war during Vietnam for a long time, and the prisoners, his fellow POWs who didn't make it, were always the ones who were like, we're going to be released by Christmas, or we're going to be released by New Year's, or whatever the date was. But these dates would come and pass, and it's like you have to have faith and hope that things are going to change, but you can't lose your perception of the current reality of the situation that you're in either. It's like you don't give up infinite hope, but don't put all your marbles on that either. It's like one of the things, I had a breakfast with my pastor a few weeks ago, and we were chatting, and a good message I got from an awesome book recently was, work as if it depends on you, but pray as if it depends on God. And it is really a combination of both of those things. When you're going through hard times, is you got to go to work. Nobody's going to do it for you. You're going to have to do the work. You're the one who's going to grow and become a better version of you. And the way I looked at it that year, because I went through so many challenges of having doors slammed in my face with insurance not covering the medical procedure. And I'm just stubborn as well. I mean, at the end of the day, they're like, you can always have the procedure, Jeff, pay for it outright, which is, ungodly expensive, and then go to bat and try to get compensated for it. And I just looked at it as, well, if you're doing this to me, you're doing this to other people. And esophageal achalasia, it's like 1 in 100,000 people that get this disease. And I've connected with lots of people around the world who have this. And I'm like, well, what happens with the people who don't battle this? And come to find out, they end up not living too long of a life.
You had a nurse,
especially body,
who encouraged you through that. Didn't you have a nurse that wound up having achalasia as well?
Yeah. So good. Yeah, good memory, man. Yeah. So when I checked into my final procedure, I went NPO because I had a procedure a few days prior, and it failed because my esophagus was in just bad shape. And so the doctor said, well, I can't order you to do this, Jeff, but you can volunteer to go NPO, no liquids via mouth. And if you do that, we'll hook you up to an IV. We'll give you a room here at the hospital, and you'll just live on an IV for a week. And it should enable your esophagus to like drain and clear out, and it'll give us a better shot. Well, when I went, my wife and I, we came home. This was in Denver. We came home so I could get my computer, some books, say goodbye to the kids, and went right back up to the hospital. And the nurse that was checking me in had actually had achalasia, esophageal achalasia, and had the same procedure performed by the physician that was performing mine a few years prior. She was living a great life, and it was like, I always call her as kind of like the angel that was finally, saying, this is going to be okay. And honestly, that time in the hospital, it was like just a total calm. I had no doubt that this was finally going to happen. And it was amazing. Rhonda was her name, and I've written a lot about that because she was kind of like the angel there to say everything's going to be okay now. It's like you've grown through this crucible to the person you need to be in order to have this procedure now to go on with life. And I always tell myself that during that year, whenever a door would slam or I'd wake up from my operation and they'd say the operation didn't go well, uh, this or that happened, and we're gonna have to try
So
again,
that happened
whatever.
during this morning.
And
You went on week long,
yeah,
and then they came back telling you basically it didn't work.
no, that was the final one. Before that, I had gone through quite a few, and I would wake up and I'd be all excited because I'd wake up and I'm like, "What happened?" And then I'd be told the surgery wasn't successful. You have to continue living on liquids, or actually, in that case, it'd be like you have to continue fasting on clear liquids, which is not the most fun thing. And the challenging thing, I have a lot of friends that do fasting because fasting is good for you. But whenever you're on a clear liquid fast, or like for that, which became 40 days for me of just clear liquids, there was no end in sight. I didn't know in this. I mean, I was told initially, hey, you need to fast for 10 days on clear liquids. I mean, I had to give them my protein shakes, and I never thought I'd be so happy to have another protein shake because I swore it off. I was like, I'll never have another protein shake in my life when I'm done with this. And I drink them every single day. I'm like the smoothie king. I love it. It's my favorite meal of the day because it's so nutritious. I put a whole lot of
Yeah.
things in
Who'd
there,
have thunk?
but it works for me. It's
Yeah.
easy.
Who'd have thunk that would be the thing you look forward to out of, you can have steak now and you wake up in the morning, you're like, I get this.
I know, yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh, I get to have my shake here after my work, and it works for me though because I like to train every day. I run, bike, I lift and stuff, and it took me years after that. I went from probably 195, 200. I was actually even heavier. Just the way my esophagus had distended, it just caused my whole body to like react
Hmm.
and inflame, and so I was just like swollen. And whenever I had my first procedure, all of that kind of water weight went away really really quick, and so I got down to 155, and I kind of hovered around 150, 155 for most of the year, and then once I did that 40-day kind of water
Hmm.
fast, I got down to I think 135,
What's your
130,
usual like healthy
130.
healthy weight that you're not starving yourself?
175, 180. Yeah, 175, 180. And so I got down to 130, 135, and ended up getting back to 155, and I held that for years. I just couldn't put on weight. And then I just changed my diet more and started lifting, and now I'm back to like 175, 180, pretty solid. I feel good. I was pretty scrawny, and I feel strong again. It's taken a long time, but it was just the process. It's like I look at it. I was fortunate to have some size on me because my body just cannibalized itself, and it's taken a while to build it back the way I wanted to. But I feel great now. I've never felt as healthy or as fit in my life, and I'm going to be 50 in less than 2 months, which is crazy. I don't feel
Yeah.
like it, but
It's
yeah.
remarkable after putting your life and your body through that kind of hardship. That it's right now it's living in paradise. It's like, man, I'm gonna be strong after this.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and you don't take any day for granted. As you know, I'm big into fitness, and I think some of it though, whenever I trained during that year, regardless that I was so hungry and stuff
Wow.
because it helped me to process my emotions and the challenging times that I was going through, and also fitness has always been a big part of my life because it gives me time to
Mhm.
think. It's like my little sanctuary where I can go and solve problems. It's my time for mindfulness to just like either one just think about problems that I'm trying to solve at an organization or to
Mhm.
listen to books or podcasts. I really enjoy it, and so I like to lift, run, and bike. And the year I came off and I was actually starting to, implement, introduce food back into my diet, my energy level went through the roof, and then COVID hit, and well, there wasn't a whole lot
Yeah.
more to do. I was taking a sabbatical from my previous role, and so I just became a monster with training and became like this ultra endurance dude. And now I'm more into I'm very I'm trying to be more strategic about my fitness, and so I look at the future. As turning 50, it's like I'm trying to set myself up for success. In the next couple of decades. So I got into lifting more, and I'll still do endurance stuff, but it's not as big part of my everyday, and it's just time consuming as well with all the travel I do. But I like it. You know, it keeps my energy up, helps me to sleep at night. Sleep is God's medicine. When you sleep in a chair for a year or don't sleep and you sit there and cough and choke, I value sleep immensely. It's the ultimate
Yeah.
miracle drug, and it's the most important part. I mean, your diet, your exercise, is important, but sleep. If you don't get sleep, you know, it's gosh. Some people wear it with a badge of honor. It's like I can go, you know, it's like I can work around the clock and do all this and that. It's like good for you. It's like he who sleeps the least will die the fastest. Quite honestly, and it's like
Yeah.
sleep, enjoy it.
Yeah. And then some people biologically they're built to where they can endure it a little bit longer. I mean, everybody's like that in different traits of their life. But yeah, I'm with you. Sleep is just so important. I can notice after a 48-hour period of me not getting the proper amount, memory an issue, mood
Yep.
an issue, more than anything memory, but that affects so much with what we deal with on a
Yeah,
daily basis.
I agree. Your memory, your mood, and I find my focus is just the older I get. If I don't get the right amount of sleep, my ability to focus and really listen just kind of goes out the door. It's not the easiest thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you know, other things, you know, going through that challenge is, I'll be honest, I was always challenged with patience in my life, and you'll see back behind me, for those who can't see, there's a little figurine of the Incredible Hulk, and I was kind of that guy. You know, I had kind of two emotions: was the calmest person in the world, and then Silverback Ape. And I ended up going through. I had an emotional intelligence coach for a while and studied emotional intelligence and ended up facilitating it around the globe. And it's one of those. It's unlike IQ, EQ. You know, it's
Mhm.
dynamic. It's something you can grow and get better at. And to me, I think going through that really helped me to embrace patience, because patience is strength. You know, and it's one of the quotes I really love by Lao Tzu is nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished.
Yeah.
And it's so true. And that's one of the hardest things in my life was having the patience to wait and just be calm. And but it's really the ultimate remedy, and it can be the most elusive as well. And I think to now in this chapter of my life, it's just my wife and I talk about this. Just like I'm just much more easygoing. The ability to adapt, because I'm an ENTJ, so I like a plan and I just like to stick with the plan. But as I went through that crucible, I could just be more adaptable, and it doesn't bother me at all. It's just kind of like, it's all good. And so I look at like all the benefits of going through hard
Hmm.
things, like that one, and it's really helped me become a better version of me. And I think for any of you out there who are going through hard things, you know, embrace it as an opportunity to learn and grow, and you come out the other side a whole different person. And trust me, I used to say this to myself. It's like there is a future you. Make that next level of you proud of the choices and the attitude that you're embracing today, because it's, you know, there's another version of you out there, a whole nother level that's waiting on you to endure these hard things that are happening to you today. And as you know, Josiah, I mean, look at where you are. You've been there and done it.
Yeah. It's remarkable. One thing I struggled with early on, you and I have talked about this a little bit, but just for context, 14 to 18 months is essentially what they told Lauren and me. They're like, we can extend your life, but honestly, that's like 18 would be a miracle. And once we got past the 18, thankful, but I was thankful and grateful. But I also had this survivor's guilt. And is that something you've kind of dealt with, with your family and just personally because there's only 100,000 people, like you said, with achalasia that get diagnosed. Is that something that you struggled with, just feeling like I've got to make the most of every day because there's people who couldn't or can't?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's why, you know, I live my life to the max now, and do all the things that I do, you know, work career wise, personally, all the travel my family and I do. all the challenges I put myself through, it's because not everybody gets this opportunity, you know. And I look at it as living life to like I got a new lease on life, honestly, and I didn't realize how sick I was because I was, you know, I was traveling the world. My career was pretty awesome. I thought I was a pretty healthy and fit dude, except I had this like nonstop cough and I couldn't eat food for the life of me and keep it down. And I just thought I was like, wow, I'm super stressed. I mean, it must be a thing when you're in your 40s. And it turns out I had this rare disease. But yeah, I look at it as this opportunity to really don't leave any potential on the table. You know, it's like, and I look at before there's kind of like there's a great book by was it David Brooks called The Second Mountain, and that first mountain was kind of like my life leading up to this disease, and then in 2019 onward it's kind of like the second mountain, as in here's an opportunity to turn your life around. And not that it was going in a bad direction, but it was just I needed to. The big thing I needed to do was stop working for people, quite honestly. Stop working for organizations and start working for myself. Doing the things that I thought that I was probably too afraid to go do, like start my own business and do my own thing. I was like, oh, I didn't think I could do that. You know, I didn't believe in myself. And this disease helped me to realize that life is really short and you are capable. You're capable of so much more. And to not leave potential on the table. You know, when I was in the Marine Corps, I prided myself on fitness, and there were so many things I wanted to do when I got out. And I think this disease helped me to realize that life is short and live it to the max. But also it really pushed me to set an example for others, and also like my kids. I didn't want my kids to see like their dad sitting around wallowing in his own you know, troubling times. And so I looked at it as an opportunity. It's like, hey, here's an opportunity to really hold on to your character and show some fortitude and grit and resilience and perseverance and tenacity, and demonstrate that to others, because people do what people see, you know. And I'm like, I don't want anybody, any of my family or friends, anyone to see me suffering. I want anybody to know that I'm going without eating. People would notice because I would come out. And here's the thing, when you lose as much weight as I did, it gets pretty expensive because none of your clothes fit anymore. And so people would notice because I would go to an event to give a talk, and I wouldn't prepare in time, and I'd put on my clothes and it looked like 2 or 3 times the size. And it's like,
I don't know if it's
and it's like, whoa, what happened to me? And so you end up having to buy a whole new wardrobe, which gets expensive. But that's how people would notice, is they're like, wow, you look a little thin there, buddy.
You're like, well, I've been trying to lose weight. This is a new look for me.
Yeah, exactly. But it could be challenging because, you know, when company really, the word comes, you know, it kind of means to break bread together. And that's one of the challenging things in business is, you know, it's pretty normal to have a business lunch or a business dinner, and you don't want to turn it on you. And so I became the king of, what is it, the Irish exit, I think it's called. You know, it's like where you just disappear, where it's like, hey, we're all going out to get something to eat here and get some drinks. And I'm like, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And then boom, you just kind of like vanish, you know?
The Irish exit.
It's yeah. It's like, I was like this apparition. It's like, man, dude, how come we never see you out there? I didn't want to put the spotlight on me and what I was going, like, I just want to go through this. I'm like, my job here is to serve the team. It's and at the end of the day, you know, as a leader, all responsibility is on you, but it's not about you. You're there to serve the team and to make the people better. And so I didn't want my personal issues to cloud what we were trying to do.
Let's talk about that a little bit. One thing I wanted to stop on that while we were thinking about it, or while I was thinking about it. During this period, you were talking about how you did the Irish exit. How much of this experience were you sharing at work with the people that on your teams? And how much of this were you really sharing with the effects of what it felt like for you, and how much your wife was going through, and then observing it around your kids, around your family, of how it was affecting them?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. So we kept it. I kept it to myself, my family and I, until April of that year, whenever insurance pulled the plug, and then I
What year
wrote
was
a
this when insurance pulled the plug? Okay.
2019. Then I wrote an article on LinkedIn. I think it's called "Hungry for Greatness," "Hunger for Greatness," and I kind of went public with the cards I was dealt and the mindset I was adapting. And it wasn't about any type of poor me. It was really to try to help bring light to the challenges of American health insurance and try to inspire other people who are going through hard things. As in, here's the mindset that I'm adopting to go through this. And so I ended up writing, not every month, but I think I wrote probably 6 articles that year, as far as just kind of like my mindset and different procedures I go through. They didn't work, and and just my learnings. And so it was all written in a form but to be positive. But I people I worked with knew, companies that I worked with knew what I was going through, but it wasn't like the topic of conversation. It was something because they typically would come across like an article or something I would post on LinkedIn and be like, "Oh my God!" It's like I had
Yeah.
no idea you were going through this, and you're our CEO or you're our CRO or whatever. It's like, yeah, we all have our own battles. We're all going
Yep.
through something. Um, but that was my goal, was just to try to be a light, because there's so much negativity out there in the world, and so I wanted to just try to be a light for others, as far as what I was learning, and that you can do hard things and still have a good attitude about it, and you got to laugh too. I mean, there's so many things I went through, and probably you've gone through. I mean, you just got to laugh about it. I mean, my wife would come in sometimes, and I would be trying to drink a shake, and I would be and it's hard because my esophagus would all clogged up, and I'd have to fast, for a few days or something. And so I would get up on the furniture and just jump off, trying to get gravity
To
like
help.
to push it down. And we would just laugh. And I have my twin brother. He would take pictures of like his at least one meal a day.
Oh, I
He would
remember
send me and
this.
be
I
like,
remember this.
he'd be like, "Dude, check out this steak." And then I get another picture. By the way, dude, I made 2 steaks. I'm gonna have one for you. Too bad, your life sucks. But I would just laugh. Some people would be like, "What an a hole." I'm like, no, it's if you can't laugh at it, it's like you're too close to it. It's like you gotta. That's part of being resilient as well. I think is you got to have a sense of humor. A sense of humor will get you so much further when you can just sit back and just laugh at like the cards you are dealt.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like, oh my God, it's like this is ridiculous. Um, but I think that was my goal, was to not be the center of attention for it. And when it first happened, I really struggled with like being around my family at the dinner table, because it was hard to be around people eating food, because when you're not eating, what you pick up is people complaining about like how hot something is, or how cold it is, or it doesn't have enough salt, or and then you see them eat half their food and be like, "Uh, I really didn't want this today because we had this, last week," and then throw it in the trash, and you see
Hmm.
waste, and so it starts to f you off a little bit. And so I was like, I just can't be around it. So I go on walks, but I got to a point, where I was like, I wanted to be around to have the camaraderie and have the conversations and stuff. But initially, you just got to sometimes separate yourself from an environment that's pulling you down, and I found that was pulling
Yeah.
me down. And what's interesting too is you probably never realize how much people talk about food, and then you hear them like having breakfast, and people, and then like my own family would be like, "What are we gonna have for lunch? What about a snack before that?" And it's like, wow, how much food do we actually
Yeah.
need in a day? And so you start to realize too that so much of our intake is just out of habit sometimes, and and so I ended up developing a different relationship with food. I see it as
Hmm.
fuel. Like, I enjoy good food, but it's I have just a whole different relationship with him in my life now. And my wife, she loves date night and going out and trying new foods and stuff. I'm limited on what I can try. I have an expanded palate over the years now. But it's limited. I mean, any spice and just does me in. So I can't do it. And I'm just simple. I'm like, I just, it's easy for me to say no. It's like, I can't have this, can't have that. But I don't look at it that way so much as I look at it as I get to have X,
Yeah.
Y,
Have
and
you always
Z.
been that way,
And
specifically with food? Like it's easier to say no, or it's just something that you built up through this experience.
yeah, it's something more I built up through this experience, and I look at it too. It's just like I look at food more as like what are the health benefits. And while I thought I was a nutritious eater before this, I'd have to go back and tell my old self, well, you
Yeah.
weren't as healthy as you thought you
Yeah,
were.
no, I deal with that too. I've been overweight for years, and then I got overweight, very overweight in 2020 because I just was sitting around not doing anything. But more 2021. I couldn't really eat a whole lot that wasn't protein during 2020 because I was going through chemo and radiation for that 12 months. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah, just a lot of sitting around, a lot of sympathy eating, and then yeah, it takes so much time that really over the last 15 months is when I took it serious, got to where taken seriously, um, and doing fasting and doing intermittent fasting and then whole day fasting during the week. But that's a hard practice to get into, and then sustaining it is even harder. When you were in the core, did
for
that
sure.
help, or was this even prior to that when you practiced
Yeah,
staying strong with what you?
I good question. I had tried fasting when I was younger in like high school and stuff. In the Marine Corps, I was going through a jungle warfare training exercise for a week, and I just decided to fast for a week. Probably wasn't the best decision of my life. I mean, it was super hot, and the training was nonstop around the clock, and I was exhausted. But I came out the other side just stronger mentally because I was like, wow, I made it through. I just chose. I didn't tell anybody. I was like, I'm just not
Wow.
going to eat. It's like I'm just going to drink my canteens and go and endure the suck. And I did. And so I kind of piggybacked off of that experience a lot, especially out of the get go. Because and I would do a lot of intermittent fasting. I spent a lot of time in the mountains here in Colorado, and I typically when I go to like Summit of 14 or I'm up at like 2 in the morning and I'm on the trail by 2:30 in the morning and I'm hiking and it's a long day and so I don't eat breakfast or anything. It's like I want to get up to the summit and then I come back down and a lot and I have food with me, but I would rarely eat until I got back, and a lot of it was just like a test
Hmm.
of endurance to go through. And to this day I intermittently fast until around noon daily during the weekdays. Sometimes it might be until 2 o'clock or something, and it just
Yeah,
works for me. I feel good. Like I don't get up and have breakfast or anything. I have like a vitamin shake. It has a ton of stuff. There's a whole nother podcast as far as all the things I put in there. It's just every vitamin known to
yeah,
mankind seems like, and I have that when I get up, and it works for me. And I don't have anything else. It's athletic greens and a whole bunch of strong reds and all that
yeah,
stuff, but it works for me. And then by the time I do have my shake in the afternoon to break my fast, I'm pretty excited about it. I'm pretty thankful, and I enjoy dinner with my family. That's like the
yeah,
big thing. So it's usually like 2 meals a day, uh, and then maybe some snacks here or there. But my snacks are always super healthy, whatever I have, and I focus on protein intake, especially in my my chapter of life. That's a big thing for me as well. Plus, the more protein you have, that's a whole nother discussion. It's like you feel more satiated, so you eat a
hmm,
lot less. But going back, to making bad choices, when you don't eat food for a year, you see how much food other people intake because you're like outside of the fish tank looking in. Finally, it's like, wow, it's like there's no cheat days, there's no sitting around watching a movie and I like eating popcorn or chips just because I'm sitting here
hmm,
watching a movie and so it's something to do. There is none of
yeah,
that, and so it becomes like that's no longer a part of life. And when you see other people do it, you start to realize like, does my body actually need that? And so you start to question is like, what does my body
yeah,
actually need versus what I'm craving because I'm bored out of my
yeah. And
mind.
so many of those things are social, like you said. Having larger meals, larger portions, 3 times a day, snacks in between, based off of stress or focus or
Yeah,
spare time that you've got. And you were talking about like popcorn during meals. It's that's something you associate with meals in the same way I do like goobers or something like that. It's something you do while you're watching a
Yeah.
movie. But that's one thing that a lot of people have asked me about when they ask, what did you do to turn it around and start losing a bunch of weight? And I'm like, a lot of little things. It wasn't all at once. It started with 2 meals a day, and it started with not until after 1 o'clock in the afternoon, not after 9 o'clock at night. And then it got into doing regular walks, and then it got into thinking about how much better I'd feel in the morning if I did those two things because it felt better that one day. And then, making sure that during that narrow window I'm eating stuff that is really delicious, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's tasty or like sweet. It means it fills my gut.
Yep. You look good, man. You look good. It's and what you said there is so crucial. It's like developing good habits takes time, and you don't want to go too hard out of the gate and try to change everything in your life. It's just like just introduce one thing, and it takes a good 60 something days to really get that down and to become just like, I call it a ritual, almost like a routine. I have my daily habits of things that I do for years. I have 10 things in the morning that I do, and I have 10 things at night. And I literally check them off every single day. But I didn't just wake up one day and like write out 20 things I'm going to do every day. It never happened. It was just like, all right, it's like this month I'm going to focus on gratitude journal, whatever that was, decades ago. And I'm going to make this a part of my life. And now I wouldn't know what life would be like without that. It's like, that's just normal, and exactly what you said. It's the little things, these little bitty tweaks you make that have a huge impact. There's a great quote. I forget who said it, but small hinges swing big doors. And it's those little things about what you eat, when you eat, going for walks, that are crucial. My wife and I are excited because I've been home for like 3 months, just exited a company. I'm on a sabbatical this month, and we love our afternoon walks here in Colorado, and I got a lot of time on my hands, and it's wonderful. And then yesterday we got to go on an afternoon walk, have dinner, and then go on an evening walk, which is great. It's those little things that
it doesn't have to be exercise as much as things that make you feel better. The podcast. This isn't something I started because I saw some small opportunity for revenue down the road. I miss having conversations with strong people, and that was something for me. I'm just a social person, some people aren't like that, and maybe you just need to, like you said, write in a diary. One thing I started doing was the grateful notes at the end of every night. I do 3, and I think I picked that up from you. I put push-up reminders throughout my day on my phone, so they pop up and they say, do the push-ups. And that's not get 140 done in the day. That's knock out 15 right now. And then, thankfulness note. I've got some set up again, going back to memory. I always want to make sure that Lauren feels appreciated, so I literally started making commitment notes every 2 weeks where it says, get Lauren something special, take her on a date, make sure that you do something for her today. And it's not that I don't care if I don't get that reminder. It becomes an obligation. Well, not an obligation is a bad word, but it's something in my calendar that I get to check off once I've done it.
Yeah. It's like personal accountability. I love that, man. And same thing. I travel a lot for work, and so I have a kind of a monthly reminder that I have on my calendar as far as like, sending flowers, making sure, like I take my wife on a date night at least once a week. It's like these little things that relationship it's a team effort, and you have to be intentional about making it work. And it's those little things, it's that really add up. And I do the same. I have reminders all over. It's such a good example. It's like right now one of the things I had done for years, like I love reading HBR, but I would hold myself accountable for reading one HBR article a week, and I'm like, why only one a week? It doesn't take me, not even 10 minutes to read this thing. It's like, why don't I just read one a day? What if I read one a day for a year? So I started it this month, and it's like one a day. It doesn't take me long, and sure enough, it's like, wow, this is it. It's every single one I read is super useful, and it's just a new habit because I read typically a book a week, and I listen to a book a week. So I go through over 100 books a year. But I really find kind of the bite-sized HBR article to be really valuable in whatever I'm doing.
HBR article?
And Yeah, Harvard Business Review. Yep. And so that's become like a daily thing where I just have them on my iPad where it's like, all right, 10 minutes, and I have a reminder. It's like, oh yeah, just take 10 minutes out of your day, read this. How can you apply a few of these best practices to what you're doing right now with a company? And so far it's been hugely beneficial. But I need those reminders, to do it. I have them either on my calendar or I have like on my phone, and it's crucial to do it, and just kind of until it becomes just like this routine ritual that can't be broken. It's like every day with the things I do with reading, gratitude, fitness, I do a cold plunge and all this stuff. And it's all for my health and kind of setting my future self up for success. But I have to like be very intentional about making these a habit. And I look at it as like putting another link in the chain. And so every day I'm trying to build this chain, and I don't want to miss a link, because you miss one and the chain gets weaker, and you miss two, you miss
the
three,
cold plunge.
and it just
What is it with people in the cold plunge? I actually did research on it. I see stuff. I see case studies in both directions. I mean, I'm all for challenging yourself on doing stuff, but agony without it's agonizing. I've done it. It sucks. And then I started looking into it because Joe Rogan had a guy on his podcast who had been doing it for a long time, and he saw benefits in people that were dealing with. He did a case study of like 100 people, and he saw that 50% of them that did it for 5 minutes or more saw a positive inkling in health improvements over the course of their life, and over the course of a 10-year span, and the other half didn't. And I was like, okay, well, this is confusing. Is it mindset? Is it personal mindset more than it is, some embracing the suck mentally going into it, and there's the other half of people who you're going into it thinking this is going to suck, and I'm not okay with suck.
Yeah, it's a combination. It's like there's the mental aspect. I look at as a leader, your job is to remain calm amidst the storm, and part of that is because emotions, are highly contagious, and so calm breeds calm. And this is so crucial for any leaders out there. It's like you come in and a situation happens and you freak out. Everybody's gonna freak out. It's like just be calm, just chill, find your breath. And so part of it is mental, just finding the calm in the storm. And let's be honest, it's like 10 to 15 minutes, or the first 10 to 15 seconds in a cold plunge is probably the worst part of my entire day every day. And I toyed around with it last year, and then coming into this year, I was just like, I'm going to just make this more of a daily habit. And it's never easy. I mean, it's something I dread when I get up. I'm like, ooh, it's gonna be terrible. But I feel great. It helps.
Sorry, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. What's that?
You made me think about
I was just saying,
you also do Epsom salts too. So are you doing both at the same time? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, good question. So I was doing the cold plunge. Well, first off, the benefits I find helps with decreasing inflammation, helps with muscle recovery, helps with sleep, helps with your immune system, strengthen your immune system, helps with circulation. There's a lot of benefits, and as much as I train, I'm always looking for that edge for recovery. And so I was doing cold baths or the cold plunge in the evening, and I found it, willpower is a limited resource. And as the day goes along and things come up, you got to take the kids to this or that, you got to have dinner, and it was becoming harder and harder to make it a daily habit in the evening. And so I've switched to the mornings now before I work out, and I find I do some yoga and stretching and stuff and plank before I do it, and then I get into that for a couple minutes. And it's so cold right now, I don't stay in it longer than 2 minutes. I mean, sometimes I got to go out and beat it with a hammer just to get into it because it's frozen.
Oh, okay, so you got it outside.
Yeah, which makes it extra challenging when it's 26 degrees below zero and you're going out there and you're busting it up with a hammer just to get into
the cold plunge for me in that temperature was stepping outside in my shorts.
Yeah, it's mentally challenging, but I find it gives you that mental edge as well. But what I find is I was texting a friend of ours, Dales Walls, this morning on this because he does them in the morning, and I'm like, wow, why do you do it in the morning? And I find it wakes me up, and it helps. My muscles are typically pretty sore in the morning, and so I take a while to stretch out and stuff. And after I do that, I lift and run, and I have never felt better. Like my workouts are so much more productive. I feel this energy, like I am ready to run through a wall. I feel fantastic. And so the way it feels afterwards, like after the first 10 or 15 seconds, I find my breath, I find my calm. I remind myself finding the calm in the storm. And when I get out, I'll dry off, warm up a little bit. I'll take a hot shower just to rinse it all off and warm up. And I feel fantastic. And it's awesome. But I was doing it at night. Like I said, it became just too challenging in the evening with everything going on in the family. And in the evenings now, I just focus on a hot Epsom salt bath, and I'll do that between 6 or 7. And I like to do my daily meditations while I'm in the bath, just relaxing. And once I get out, my body kind of like starts to shut down, ready for kind of like preparing for sleep. And it really helps me. Whereas doing that cold plunge in the evening, it was like this psychological thing, of like, oh, I gotta man up and do this, gotta eat the frog and make this happen. And now I just get up and it's like, once I get that done, I feel like I've won for the day. Because it's honestly, out of everything I do every day, that's the hardest thing for me is that cold plunge. And I don't know anybody who does these things that says it's easy, because getting in it is just brutal. But the benefits, the way I feel afterwards is amazing. Like I said, the recovery time for fitness really decreases that, and I can't complain the way I feel afterwards. I feel great. So, but yeah, I think it would be easier if the cold plunge was located in my house versus walking outside. In the extreme cold, that does add an extra layer of suck.
Especially when you're having to break it apart, because instead of jumping in for 2 minutes, you got to be thinking about it.
Yeah, I keep a big hammer sitting outside now. I used to just always go out to the garage and I just keep the hammer sitting out there, a big sledgehammer, and I bust it up that way.
I think going back a little bit, there's so many people. I know so many people who. Gratefully for me, they've reached out and they're like, when are you going to do another podcast? And some of them have shared their story as to why they're like looking for a message like that. And it's not any big thing. It's just because there's one big thing or a few little things that are going on in their life, and they're looking for some motivation, not even inspiration, but motivation as to just changing one thing. And a lot of it isn't physical, which I think you and I have developed into now, because it's something we can concentrate on. For a lot of them, it's just mental hardships that they're going through.
Yeah, and a couple other things I find with the cold plunge too is, it's an ability to practice mindfulness. I mean, when I'm in it, I'm focusing on my breath. I'm being extremely patient. I find it's an opportunity to relish in acceptance, if you will. Just accept the cold and embrace it, and also a time to be patient. So there's all these kind of benefits psychologically and physically that really come out of it that I find are extremely helpful. And here's one of the things I've learned: you can cold plunge every day and never post anything about it on social media. Hopefully people will learn that because I never post about it. But I see some people who post every single day about a cold plunge, and it's like you can cold plunge, you can run every day, you can train like Rocky, and you don't have to tell anybody about it, folks. It's like, here's the thing: the most beautiful photographs in the history of the world were once developed in a dark room. Just go dark. It's one thing to try to inspire others. It's another to try to validate what you're doing every day because you're addicted to likes on social media, and that's just not my thing.
Yeah.
I don't.
If you think about like the best pictures that you see in people's houses and in studios and in museums, most of them don't have people in them at all. And if they did, those people are long gone, and you probably aren't going to read the write-up on who that person was. You're just looking at it, and a lot of the time I'll look at it, I'm like, what nut climbed this? It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like it's incredible, but you're not thinking about that person's backstory or why they were doing it or what was going on in their life. You're just thinking to yourself, that's pretty remarkable. That's a remarkable view.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and that's another thing. This year we're kind of getting into some habits here. Is things that I've tried to stop doing. Is like I found myself last year a bit doom scrolling on social media, and it's like, what am I doing? So I just took all those apps off my phone, and if I want to have a doom scrolling session, I have to go sit down on my computer and actually log in and do it. So it's less than it's not really a big part of my life anymore, and I find I just get so much more done. And plus, it's I think it's just better mentally. I just get more done. I'm focused. It's like I'm just gonna read another book or something instead of just doom scrolling on social media, which is a complete waste. It's fine to do it once in a while, and have some laughs and things, and it's fun, but it's just not for me. And that's one of the things I've been focused on out of the gate this year, and it's been hugely beneficial, just like from a psychological aspect. Just be more mindful of where I am every day. Just try to unplug from being plugged into my phone. And so I find I have less and less apps on my phone just so that I can use it as a phone, pretty much. And it's way better, man.
Well, I would argue that personally, you and I met because of the device in my hand, and some of the strongest people I know in my life I met because of that. And there's things that folks listening to this can do. If you are endlessly scrolling, it's probably because of the content that you're putting in front of your eyes. And Instagram, Facebook, there's great communities on, but you have to be intentional. I went through my suggested feed at one point last year, the year before, and I just started tapping on stuff that it was irrelevant or doom scrolling. And it was inviting for me to be doom scrolling, and I just told I don't want to see this content. And then I started purposely searching content that I wanted to see, stuff around aviation, stuff around sports that I'm into, like rugby and tennis, and I told it I like this content. And it took me all of 15 minutes, and now that's all I ever see is motivational quotes by really intelligent people like Marcus Aurelius. Probably about 50% of the quotes by Marcus Aurelius probably aren't Marcus Aurelius. I don't think he spent that much time talking and writing.
I agree.
But now it's more a time for enlightenment and following up with people whose lives I'm actually really interested in or inspired by. So I think there can be some benefits of the mediums. Early on, when I was on Facebook looking for support groups for glioblastoma, I was looking for inspiration and motivation, and I almost immediately cut myself off from all those communities because they were so negative. So I don't really communicate with a lot of people in those communities unless it's people reaching out to Lauren or I asking for real questions about how to deal with it, what we're doing.
That's interesting, man. I had the same experience. I was ostracized from various support groups because of being, it's called toxic positivity, I think is the term. I'd post really positive things and they would tear it down. And I even, my background is in biomedical engineering. I worked with a group of biomedical engineers at Georgia Tech down the road from you on a device to help repair peristalsis and achalasia patients, and posted a video about, what the team had done. And it was taken down within 2 minutes. And I was like, I'm out of here. It's basically just a lot of people, like I said, victims wanting to seek validation for being a victim. And so I find those support groups are useless. And you're right. If you're intentional on social media and you kind of train your feed to feed you what is useful, it can be very beneficial. And mine are like that, but I find I'm in a point in my life I just don't go through it too much anymore, which works for me.
It's hard when you're reading 100 books a year.
Yeah, I'd rather be reading.
I read 4 at a time, and the reason why is because my mind gets so easily distracted. I'll read a chapter at a time, and if I'm still really engaged, I'll read another chapter. But my requirement for the day is to read a chapter in each book. And once I get to a stopping point where I'm either getting distracted, honestly, by one of the other books I want to read, or just the content is losing my focus, I'll switch to a different book. I'm not trying to hit any goal of any certain number of books for the year, but they're all learning, education, self-fulfilling books that I'm trying to get through because of things that I'm either going through or because I see a relation between where I want to be personally.
Yep. That's good, man. That's good. Yeah, mine came about just in the military. I used to read so much because you got a lot of time on your hands, quite honestly. Sitting on a ship or sitting on the middle of the desert. And then once I got to college, my goal was to read a book outside of whatever it was I was studying every week. And that's just carried on. And I spend so much time traveling or, running and biking. And I use an app called Scribd, although they just rebranded, called Everand, and it's a monthly subscription. You can listen to unlimited audiobooks, and so I'll listen to podcasts, but not as much anymore. And so I really enjoy a good audiobook while I'm running, or lately I've been doing projects around the house, and it just kind of fills the time while I'm whatever it is I'm doing. I enjoy it. It's not a competition. It's just like one of those things where I'm like, I can be learning something new while I'm doing this. What am I doing?
Dale doesn't believe that it's reading a book if you're not physically reading a book. Where do you stand on that?
Oh, I keep two different lists. I keep a list of books I'm actually reading, either on my iPad or physically, because I read a lot of digital books because of travel. It's like easier to, you can have unlimited books on your iPad, and I always have my phone as well. But I keep two different lists. I keep a list of audiobooks and then a list of actual, books that are physical books that I read. And I try to come up with like my top 10 or 15 recommendations from both lists at the end of the year. And I do find like sometimes I read a book or I listen to one and it's just too complex or something. There's so much in it that I have to sit down and read it because I'm like, I got to take some notes from this. And I find I learn better if I read because I can outline, I'm thinking, I can stop. But the books I like to listen to most are typically biographies just because it's a long story, quite honestly. So I'm not sitting there like underlining, key things that I want to remember. It's just like a story that I really enjoy. And anyways, that works for me. But I agree. I kind of look at it as there's two different mediums, and they are separate in my mind.
It's fair. In my mind,
reading and listening are different.
When I listen to a book, I definitely feel as if I've gotten 100% of the same content, and I'm a very auditory person. So for me, listening to people's stories and listening to podcasts to me is 100% as engaging. But there is, in my mind, there's an accomplishment to reading a book, writing in it, engaging with it, and gifting that eventually. I love the idea of, people used to say that all the time, and I love the idea of gifting a book, and even gifting a book that's got your underlying of what you liked about it, because that's a conversation you get to have with the secondary reader. I forget, I think it was Churchill who said, no one ever borrows a book, you give a book. You never expect to get it back. And the nice thing about notations and highlighting and that kind of thing is what stood out to the last person who read it before you. And you might be able to find some other things in it that speak to you, but you learn a little bit about the person who's reading it previously to you, which you can kind of do with a podcast when somebody recommends it to you, when they'll bring up some things that they got out of it, and that's really special. And that's something that is a parallel between books and auditory, which I like.
I like that, man. That's a good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. I like that. Yeah, I rarely gift books that I've underlined and highlighted, but I think I want to not because I rarely go back to them. It's like I end up just going on my shelf. But yeah, some of the top gifted books I'd say are one that I really loved last year by David Brooks was The Road to Character. That's going to be new on my gifting list. Leading at the Speed of Trust has always been one of my top ones, just because it's good for business and your personal life. What about you, Josiah? What are you sharing with your top gifted books?
I will gift The History of Britannia, which I'm reading right now. That was a gift that I got for Christmas, and I'm just really enjoying that. It's very much a biography, the entire history of the British Isles, and it's just incredible. So many incredible characters, and they exist. They're not just stories, they're people that existed in 1200 BC, or 1200, 1300, 1400, and they lay the foundation of what the modern First World looks like now, which is just incredible. Not all their stories are fantastic, but you can see a lot of practices and a lot of devotion to certain practices that we do now, which are really motivating. And out of chaos came order, which is kind of incredible. And I can't think of how many times that's come up. Feeding the Good Wolf. Remember, what was that one book that you sent me? Which it's the wolf. I've actually got it right back here behind me. Oh, sorry, not Wolf. The Last Arrow. The
Last Arrow. Yes.
I love that book. That one I actually have gone back and read, but I do agree with you. Most books that I have wind up sitting on the shelf afterwards. It's a bit of a trophy when I finish it, but I do really like getting books that were from somebody else that they've read before. My father's like you; he's an avid reader. He probably reads 100 books a year, and he's been doing that for a long time. He has stacks of them next to the bed that he's read, and he just hasn't gotten back to putting them on the shelf.
That sounds like me. Yep. I'm looking around my office. There's stacks of books everywhere. There's books in pretty much every room of our house. I remember a quote I read when I was young. It said, "A room without books is like a body without a soul." I think every room in our house has a lot of soul, and there's just stacks of books that have either been read and haven't been filed away or waiting to be read. And I have new books come in almost every day. And my wife, she doesn't complain. She's an avid reader as well. She loves to read. And there's something I came across recently where it's like a good book is kind of like, a fine wine. I know you're into wine. It's like you have to enjoy it at the right time, the right place. And so, yeah, it's like wherever my mind takes me. Every book I read, there's typically 2 or 3, if not more, books that come out of that I'm like, get on my list. And sometimes just like, I just go down a rabbit hole of studying some author or somebody, just I got to consume everything they've ever written. And before I get back onto like whatever it is I was studying. And I like it, man. It's literally decades and days. You get to learn in days what it took somebody else decades to possibly learn. And so it's just this adventure that you get to go on. And I love it. It's a lot of fun. I mean, even if I wasn't a consultant, I would still consume as much as I do. Because here's the thing with being in leadership or being a consultant or an advisor to a company. What I always say is don't be the smartest person in the room. Your job is to make the room smarter. At the same time, though, you want to help make the room smarter by not telling them what to do, but drawing it out of them. And it helps if you have that experience and the the intuition to take them on this journey. But yeah, I just find it's like comes back to StrengthsFinder. One of my top strengths is learner and achiever. It's like I love to learn, but you don't want to get stuck in just learning mode and not accomplish anything. And so I have times in the morning and the evening where I sit and read, and it's my time. I really, really enjoy it. It's one of my favorite times of the day, which is way more fun than the cold plunge. I'll be honest.
Yeah, dreading one and just can't wait for the next one.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Josiah. It's been a pleasure. And I hope we add value to your audience.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for the privilege of having you as one of the early guests. It's an honor.
My pleasure, man.
Take care.
Thank you.